Welcome back to the Fam Lab. I'm Barrett Bingham. I am here with Matt Mead and Mikey Kinsfather as part of our family ministry team. Hey, thanks for listening, and this should be episode 1 of season 2, and I think that's what it's going to be. We are coming to you, well, today we're in the Fam Lab, but the next 3 episodes are very special episodes. The next 3 that you hear from the Fam Lab actually took place at Harding University in Searcy, Arkansas, on campus at a coffee house there called Midnight Oil as part of the Kibo Group. Midnight Oil supports Kibo Group in Uganda, Africa, and we are excited to be there, and hopefully you'll be able to tell that we were excited to be in a different location, and you should be able to hear, especially in episodes 2 and 3, some coffee sounds in the background, a lot of grounds being smashed, espresso being made, all sorts of good stuff. There were way more people around than a typical episode, but we had a great time visiting with several different people, and so we have a lot of really cool guests covering a lot of different topics and some very fun stuff. This first episode that we're on now was on spiritual health, and somewhat defining spiritual health, but also talking through how do we assess spiritual health in students, in our teens, our children, and what does that look like? So Matt is going to introduce Jill and Harrison and tell you a little bit about them, and then we will get into the episode.
We are blessed to have Jill Davis and Harrison Dell on the podcast. Kyle and Rosalind sat down with them. Jill is a professor at Harding University. She teaches in the mathematics department, but in addition to her day-to-day responsibilities, she has a ministry for girls on campus that has a Wednesday night devotional that many of our graduates attend, and she provided some great insight in how to think about intentional parenting. And we also have Harrison Dell on the podcast. Harrison is one of the youth ministers at the Downtown Church of Christ in Searcy, where he's been for the last 8 years. We are blessed to gain from his insight and wisdom as well. So without further ado, our conversation with Jill Davis and Harrison Dell.
Hey, welcome everybody to the Fam Lab. Thank you so much for being here. I'm Kyle Beard. I'm here with Rosalind Miller and Harrison Dell and Jill Davis, and we're going to be talking about what it means to define spiritual health. And so glad you guys are here today. Thank you so much for joining us. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Jill, you want to go?
Sure. My name's Jill Davis. I'm married to Brooks. We've been married for 29 years, and we have 3 children. Our boys are married, and they're 26 and 24, and then our daughter Allie is a senior at Harding, and she's 21. So I teach math at Harding University. Back to you, Harrison.
And I'm Harrison Dell, and I'm married to Kelly. And we have one baby girl named Marlo. She's hitting 11 months. And then I've got another one on the way named Oakley. I am a youth minister at Downtown Church here in Searcy. Have been for about 8 years.
Awesome. Great. Super glad you guys are here today.
Yeah, thank you.
Like I said, we just kind of want to define what spiritual healthiness looks like and what that means for our kids of all ages. So how would you define spiritual health and what that means for our kids?
I like Jill starting.
Okay. Well, to me, I think spiritually health, biblically to me, you're healthy if you're bearing fruit. Mm-hmm. And so to me, that's what you're looking for in your children is fruit. You're looking for good fruit, and you're looking at what kind of fruit they're producing, and you're watching. You're watching a lot and paying close attention. I think it's a very, very good question to ask because I think in our culture we can get very, very busy. I'm reminded of a scripture in Proverbs, which gives us a lot of wisdom, that says, know well the condition of your flocks. Pay attention. It says, riches are not assured forever, and I think it says a crown is not assured for generation. It doesn't just happen. You do have to be careful. Watch.
For sure.
Yeah, and if I think about being sick, a lot of times we talk about our body fighting against itself, and For me, I would define health as like our body working well together. Everything is working in concert, in harmony. And so, like, I believe that, like, we are firstly a spiritual being. We don't have souls. We are souls that have bodies. So everything that makes up a person working together, full force, instead of me working in conflict with myself, that's when I'm sick, is when I'm contradicting my nature, who I am and who I'm trying to be, and that conflict is, I would say, that's sick. And so healthy is every part of me being fully integrated and working toward my ultimate goal as a spiritual being.
I love all of that you guys have said. It's really interesting because in society today, we evaluate our kids. We look at them academically, we look at their athletic ability, even we look at how they are able to socialize. We start doing all of that pretty early. When do you guys think we should start looking at their spiritual health? When does that faith formation start and just that assessment start for us as parents?
I think it starts immediately, because I think one of the biggest things you're doing is praying for your children, and that happens before they ever come. And you are hiding things in their heart that they don't even know are there. When you're playing those scripture songs and taking them to a little Bible class and they're pounding out, tap, tap, tap the Bible or whatever they're doing. I think so many times I think of those scripture hymns that we played over and over, and I'll ask the kids sometimes, do you remember that? And they'll go, I don't really remember that. And I'll say, well, it made you who you are. It's in there. It's hidden.
Yeah.
It's hidden in there that the Spirit can work with later. So I don't think it's ever too early, although the goal, I think, is so important. It isn't to have a perfect, well-behaved 2-year-old or 4-year-old, or 4th grader or junior high kid. The goal is to have a man and woman of God who loves God with all their heart, who's going to be a faithful follower and servant and bear fruit for the kingdom. So that doesn't always look like a great, I think the goal in mind is important, but I think it's never too early to start. In fact, sometimes it's so much easier when they're younger because you can control a lot more.
Right.
So you have a lot more opportunity to get those habits in place. It's a lot harder to start introducing something to a junior high than to a preschooler who this is just how life has been.
With Marlo at the age she's at, like, I've told her, I really don't think this is an exaggeration. I think I've told her 6,000 times that she is good. And it's because it just is bubbling out of me. I can't even really resist saying it. I've not tried, but I don't think I could resist it. It's because she just exudes goodness to me, and that's in view of how often she poops and screams and all those other things. It doesn't really affect my just complete joy in her. So, on some level, I sort of don't see myself trying to train her. Right now, I feel like I'm just experiencing her and enjoying her and sort of like knowing that down the road there are going to be ways that she pushes, and those are going to be times of like refining and learning and stretching. But I also think that like she is already, just in the way her mom and I are like smiling at her and enjoying her, she's watching the way we interact with each other. And so there are things happening right now that are shaping her, her spirit, her walk with God. But in another sense, I feel as though I'm waiting a lot right now for a later time where she's gonna develop a real fighting spirit, and that'll be good.
Yeah.
It's hard to sometimes just be intentional about teaching our kids and like evaluating them. As Rosalind said, we measure and evaluate them on their sports, academics, and everything like that. And so when they're younger, you're just experiencing, like you said, and you want them to be healthy, to know that they are loved, to know that they are good. But when do you start having those conversations with your spouse? I mean, I think about it. I have 2 girls, and one of them is 9, And so I talk with my wife, Leah, about, when do we have conversations about just her spirituality. It should have happened and did happen earlier, but what I'm getting at is you have to be intentional about those conversations. It isn't always something that you think naturally or it's just going to happen. We were talking earlier this week about, just the different things that how you teach your kids about their eating habits or something like that. It's not until in the moment do you realize, I need to tell them about this. So when it comes to our spiritual health with our kids, are there moments that you need to plan for, in a sense, when you're talking about their spiritual health? Does that make sense?
I would say yes. There are lots of moments you plan for, but as Harrison said, also so much is what they're picking up on.
Yeah.
And I think something you have to fight in our culture right now is a very child-centered family. I think back as I remember when the kids were little, I wanted them to see that I had some activities that they were a part of. There was an organization that I purposely volunteered for because the kids could go with me. I remember Allie would go and we would play at the Sunshine School, which is a school here in town for handicapped children, and it was at recess. And it was good because they could see Allie doing the activities the way a child is supposed to ride the bike, and then these kids would mimic her.
Yeah.
And so, you're doing little things. You want your kids to... I remember as an adult, one time coming back home to my parents, getting up early and seeing my mom reading her Bible with coffee and saying, "How often have you done this?" Mm-hmm. And she said, "Oh, I always did this." And I said, "I wish I would have known that." And it made me think, I want my kids to catch me praying with the neighbor. I want my kids to catch me studying my Bible. My mom would do it and put it up before we woke up. And that needs to be something that your kids see you do.
Yeah.
And so those interactions that you're having with your spouse, I don't think it's ever too early to be proactive. And the same point, though, you don't check your kid's temperature every morning and go, okay, you're 98.7, carry
right.
on. That can be obsessive, too. So you're looking for signs. There was one of my children, if he laid down on the couch, I thought he's sick. He does not be still.
Yeah.
Another one, you could see their eyes got red right before they got sick. So again, that's why there's so much quality time. Not quantity time is what I meant to say. Because you know your children, and you know their weaknesses, and you're going to have to teach them how to be kind, and you're going to have to teach them how to think of others.
And I worry about measuring. I think about when you say trying to make sure our kids are, making the grade is just such a toxic idea these days that I worry about that when we talk about parenting and we talk about our kids' health. But I understand that it is loving. It is about having something identifiable that you can say, okay, this is growth, this is learning, this is health, and it's exciting. That's the ultimate good thing about it. So when my sister Carissa is saying things like, that's such a big girl thing to do, that, she's trying to help show them you've taken a big stride. Right? And she actually emphasizes making a choice. She'll talk about, did you make a good choice right there? That was a good choice, and talks about that. Or, when we get into youth group, I talk with our junior high and high school students, and I say, I'm going to know whether or not you're meeting some benchmark goals we have for your discipleship based on questions you're asking. So I'll say, if you are interested in what this youth group gives me, and therefore you decide whether or not to come to something because who else is going to be there? Are my friends going to be there? Then we see that as a certain point in your spiritual development. But we hope for you to move from what this group gives me to how this group grows me. And if you're asking how this group grows me, then it may not matter so much if my friends are coming, but why do I need to be there? Because of what it does for me in my heart and in my journey with God. And then we say, if you're graduating and you've moved from what this group gives me to how this group grows me, ultimately we hope that you ask, how do I grow this group? Because we want 30 and 40-year-old and 50-year-old men and women at this church to be saying, what is it that when I pour out into this community, how am I blessing other people? It's no longer, are my friends coming, or even, why must I be there, but who could I invite? Who's somebody that I feel the Spirit leading me to? So when we name these growth phases, when we name these benchmarks and say, this is what you can aspire to, it's not because we want to put pressure on them and make them constantly worry that they're not measuring up, but because we want them to be excited about their growth.
I think going back to a previous analogy, I just talked about the fruit, in the same way that I can't go in the kitchen and make a strawberry. A strawberry plant has to make that. But I can't go plant a strawberry plant and then come back a month later and expect to pick a bushel of strawberries. You have to be a good gardener. And, what does that look like? Well, it looks like I, first of all, give it a place that it can thrive, so that maybe I fertilize the soil, make sure it's got good sunlight, water. There's stuff I can do to make sure the environment's good soil. And then the other thing I can do is protect it. At our house, I'd have to build something to keep the deer out from eating it, to make sure the weeds don't choke it out. So I think the same analogy is true with your children. You have to be a good gardener to give them the best scenario for growing spiritually. And so you can fertilize that soil, you can give them put them in a good place, you can give them good resources, you can do those things. And then also on the flip side, you have to be protecting them from the outside things that are affecting them. And sometimes I think of an example with our children where my husband and I realized we just watched our kids hike up stairs for another Sunday night and just tune out. And both he and I said, we got to do something. They're just completely tuning out. And we said, let's join a small group. And we joined a small group, started a small group with families of our children's ages that involved them. And all of a sudden, that Sunday night went from walking up and them just zoning out to a time where they were involved. And that was a good change. Mm-hmm. And, I had a friend who, told her kids, we're moving you to this school, but if something happens, you may come home to a for sale sign in our yard. I mean, nothing is above where what's good. We'll move. We'll change jobs. We'll move, whatever. I think those are examples of times where sometimes something needs to change.
Sure. I think all of those things are excellent, and I just appreciate the very tangible examples that both of you have given us as far as seeing your parent pray and read their Bible. Those are very tangible things that we can do as parents, and also asking questions and seeing what kind of answers you get back. I think that's a great way to measure spiritual growth. We talked about having your kids pray. What are the things that they are thinking about and praying about? That's a great way to measure spiritual growth. So I appreciate those tangible things that I think we can do to help our children grow spiritually. Now, what do you think are some tangible things that we can encourage them to do to kind of consider their own spiritual health? That's something I think about. I have a high schooler, and then I have 2 in college now. So I'm thinking about them and as a parent away from them, what can I do to encourage them? Is it too late for me to encourage them? I mean, where are we with helping them? And what's some tangible things we can do?
I mean, some of it is really scary as a parent. If you're really wanting to start finding out whether any of this is sticking and that this is something that they're claiming for their life and for their future, this is who they want to be and whose they want to be. It means just sort of releasing some of the control that you may have had for some years. I'm particularly thinking about upperclassmen in high school and as they're striving for autonomy and you're trying to measure how much to give that. But I think you're trying to allow for the mistakes and trying to open things up for conversation rather than because I said so. You're trying to see what choices they make apart from you. And so expressing pride in them and enthusiasm and excitement for this part of the journey. Like, this is a place you and I have not been before. This is new territory for me and for you. And I'm excited to see some of what instead of like having this immense fear that is almost crippling, just making sure your kid knows, I'm interested to see some of the choices you make as we give away some more freedoms where I was normally just sort of making you toe the line. I'm gonna bless you to make some choices, and then as long as you know, it's gonna then turn back into some conversation, and I'm gonna see. I want to be able to hear your heart and find out what informed that decision, or okay, so what were the things you factored in. But it's scary. I don't want anybody to think I'm not saying that. It's super hard to get to that place with some of your growing young adults.
Well, and it's a spiritual battle. I think we never forget that it's a spiritual battle. So we're dealing with unseen forces of good and evil, and that battle at war for our children's soul. And I think their biggest play is on our knees. As a parent, I learned very quickly that I wanted my children to have a better mother than I knew I could be. And so, therefore, I begged the Lord to put outside, to work in spite of my failings. Mm-hmm. And so it's never too late to pray that. And I love that idea because a prayer doesn't have a shelf life. You pray something that says the Lord gathers those. So that goes with them their whole life, I believe. Yeah. And so you pray for people to come in their life. You pray for people to not come in their life, and there comes a season where you're not the number one voice in their ear. And so those intangibles of prayer are just huge. And it's never too late for that. Another story that always helped me, I think it's Patrick Mead that told a story a long time ago about when he was a missionary overseas and he was teaching his son to drive, and they had to put a big L in the back of their car for learner. And he had just gone out with his son and come back. His wife asked him to go get a loaf of bread, and he jumped in the car and didn't take that learner sign out. And he made a wrong turn onto a roundabout. And a guy got really frustrated and pulled him over, and he saw the guy getting out of his car about to just come give it to him. And then the guy saw the learner sign and said, "Oh, you're a learner." He goes, "No worries, buddy. You'll get it. We all do this." And he said he thought just the fact that he recognized he was a learner changed that guy's attitude. He said, "I put L's all over our house because I wanted to tell my kids." I'd get myself frustrated with my kid, and I'd go, "Wait a minute. Have you ever been 12 years old before?" "No." "Carry on, you're a learner." And I'm a learner. Awesome. I've never had a 12-year-old before. I've never had a 26-year-old before.
That's right.
So we're all learning in this, and once again, our kids have to see us fail. I think that's been something that has stuck in my mind too.
For sure. Well, we're going to wrap up with this has been a great conversation, and really appreciate you guys bringing some wisdom and bringing some thoughts into this. What are some just words of advice that you could give parents to in the conversation and them having some difficulty defining spiritual health for their kids, or just some practical things of helping them be better parents at helping their kids be more spiritually healthy?
Guard your heart, for it is the wellspring of your life. And so define spiritual health for yourself, and recognize that your children are watching more than they're listening. And so like the spiritual health of your home is just, that's going to permeate into your kids. They're not going to even know it. But don't worry so much about whether or not your kids are learning to love Jesus. Concern yourself with the monopoly Jesus has on your heart, and your kids will watch and they will receive. And Don McLaughlin said last year at our Wellspring parenting event, he said, your kids have spent their entire lives trying to help you be a parent. And so just know that you can make those mistakes, and as soon as they leave your home and go off into the big wide world, that'll be when you start feeling like you've learned something about being a parent, and it'll all be too late, so don't worry about it.
Right. And failures can be your biggest teachers.
Yeah.
And you can be grateful because God has shown you something that it's time to get down and work on. And don't feel like you're alone, because every child is different. If you have more than one child, you realize really quickly it's not a lot about you. And so the beauty of our faith is that God never asks us to do anything about ourselves. He's given us himself with us. He's also given us people to walk alongside of us. And in the church, we have people older than us that we can just ask to encourage us and, pick out some people, have them over. We did that so much. Just invite people over and pick their brain. And most of the time, they're not going to tell you what to do. They're just going to say, oh, you'll be okay. You're doing great, And that's what I hope. I hope that you'll find your audience will be encouraged. I heard a definition of encourage this last week that I thought was great. It said, to encourage is to instill courage. And courage may not necessarily move a mountain, but it can show you how to climb. And I think that's what I hope for your listeners, is they'll find courage in this.
We're back in the Fam Lab. Hope that coffee noise wasn't too distracting for you. It should be really quiet in our studio in comparison. But shout out to Travis, making it sound good. We appreciate him helping us record this, put it all together, make it a seamless episode for you to enjoy. So Barrett, Matt, and Mikey, all back in the Fam Lab, talking about and debriefing a conversation on spiritual health. We appreciate Rosalind and Kyle speaking with Harrison and Jill. But let's just do kind of first impressions. What did you guys think of the conversation with Jill and Harrison? I think they both did a really good job. Me and Matt have already joked about how quotable Jill is. She has some really good nuggets, some good takeaways. I know she came in with maybe one little green Post-it note, and we were kind of doing some sound check stuff, and she just had like 3 quotes on there. And man, didn't she sound great? She did such a good job.
She did a great job. And what a neat opportunity to sit down with people who have been so intentional in thinking about how they relate to kids, to students, to their own children, and their spiritual growth. And just, you could just tell from that brief conversation how important the relationship that their kids have with God is to them, and how that they have emphasized that to them as they've been rearing their children. And I really appreciated what Jill said about being focused and intentional about creating opportunities for growth. She mentioned the school that she took her young daughter to, when she was and how she did that intentionally so that not only her daughter would learn, but the other kids could learn from her daughter, and just seeing that as an opportunity for growth. But at the same time, she talked about being balanced and not being obsessive with taking your temperature every day, or really having to assess your child's spiritual situation all the time, but keeping it at the forefront and on your mind so that you are looking for those opportunities.
Yeah, she did a great job. All really good points. I know we are especially thankful for Harrison kind of stepping in last minute. We kind of pulled him out of the crowd, and he did a great job for us for sure. He's actually part of the board. I think that's right, Matt, that he's part of the board with the Kibo group. And so he helps out with the ministry that Midnight Oil Coffeehouse supports. And so Harrison is a man that wears many different hats: youth minister, board member, father, husband. So we really appreciated his time for sure, and had some great things to say. I loved what he had to say about, calling your children good. And, one of my notes from his conversation was, we need to douse our children in prayer, cover them in prayer was one of the last things he said. And I just think as a parent, it's really easy to think of, okay, what are these growth opportunities, and think very practically. But maybe sometimes easy, especially for me, to forget, I prayed really hard for Bear, my son, before he was born. And maybe those first couple of months, I prayed really, really hard for, his wife, and, trying to think of all the things like, okay, when he's getting married, I'm going to have to say that I've prayed for her, his wife, and, all these different things. But then that kind of tapers off as you think, okay, I need to make sure he can say Bible. That needs to be one of his first 10 words. And make sure he can pat the Bible, and all this. But are we still, covering them in prayer? That's so important.
Well, and Jill also reminded us that it is a spiritual battle that we're at all just in our everyday lives, and that our biggest place, she said, is on our knees. That prayer is so important. It is, and just being open with your kids about how you're dealing with spiritual things too, and showing them that you're trying to grow and your knowledge of God and your relationship with God. I think that was a really good point as well.
Couple of things that just jumped out to me is that the focus on your own spiritual health and your own spiritual practices as being the things that you invite your kids into, whether that's allowing them to witness first and then inviting them to participate in. I think that's so important. Sometimes we think we have to manufacture these opportunities for our kids, and there is some creativity in that. But hopefully it's a part of your life rhythm that you're inviting them into those things. And, you begin taking them on a hospital visit, or you begin having them help you prepare to have people over in your home. Hospitality was a major kind of theme of that conversation, and how that shapes us spiritually. There's just something about serving others and inviting them to have conversations around the table that has a formative effect. And so many of these things are intentional choices about how you schedule, how you think about time and priorities, and as we look at fruit and we look at how our kids bear fruit, we have to look at those ways that we've gardened and the ways that we've provided them the environment to succeed, and the intentionality of both Harrison and Jill in that was inspiring to me as a listener, for sure.
I really appreciated how Harrison explained that in his role as a youth minister, he has in mind some phases that kids go through in spiritual growth, and how he is open with the students about what those phases are, and that he uses those as things he can talk to them about so that they're at least aware of them, if not able to work towards some of those goals. But just communicating with kids those expectations for things that they're growing towards. I thought that was a really good point.
Absolutely. So after listening to the episode, and maybe I'll throw this question to you guys, but after listening to it and kind of hearing the different definitions and different ways to assess, and there's a lot of really good information, a lot of good nuggets, but how would you say is the best way to assess a student's spiritual health or a child's spiritual health from that episode?
I think they provided a helpful framework in thinking about your child's faith kind of holistically. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And so any way that we look at our kids' faith, should include, this holistic view. And, we need to think about how, not only are we, looking for our kids to grow in knowledge about God, but we're looking at their hearts, and we're hoping that, they grow in loving the things that God loves, and becoming angry at the things that would anger God, and that they're treating their bodies in a way that's God honoring, that they're, really thinking about the fact that they, are a soul. Harrison talked about that, and how the soul is, of ultimate importance. And, in terms of defining those things, sure, that's always going to be a challenge, but it is not going to happen by accident. It's going to happen by taking specific looks at those things at various periods, and talking to other people who have kids the same age, and talking to people who have kids that are older than yours, and really, parenting in community, so you can know what some of those things that you should be looking for are, and you can, then share those with someone else who's in the next phase down from you in the parenting life cycle.
That's great, Matt. I really love that idea of mentoring each other and helping each other and parenting a community. I guess when I think about assessing the spiritual health of our kids, I think about younger kids, kids the age of my children, elementary age. And we still pray together with them at night. And I think listening to how they talk to God shows you some of that growth, because I know I've seen changes in just things that they pray for and how they pray and how they are receptive to discussions that we have about the ways that we pray and what we pray for. I think that's one way. And something that's come up several times, and Jill started with this, is fruit. And when I think about the fruit, not just the fruit of our labors, but also the fruit of the Spirit and how that translates into our lives. And I love using that language of the fruit of the Spirit with kids, because that's something that they can learn at an early age. I remember hearing my sister-in-law one time when her kids were really small saying, this is an opportunity for you to show self-control right now. And I thought that was so cool that she was talking about self-control with the child. And so that's something that I like to do. And I think it's something that we really could implement with our kids, is just talking about those fruits of the Spirit and how they affect your everyday life.
Absolutely. Any kind of closing thoughts and last minute things, just kind of in review of what Harrison Dell and Jill Davis had to say in their time with us?
I think the phrase that is incredible takeaway from the episode is prayer doesn't have a shelf life. And this idea that our prayers are out there for things to happen in the future. We don't always know the time or necessarily know what the response is going to be, but we should never cease in being prayerful. And I know that's tough for me. I haven't always been the best spiritual leader in our home about us praying together as a family, and I'd like to improve in that. And I think part of that always goes back to, it's tough to surrender control in that way, and especially when we think about our kids, like we want to have control over the outcomes of the things that they're a part of and what their, next step of life is going to look like. But, we see each and every day we don't have control. And so relinquishing that in an intentional way to God is a part of our own growth spiritually, for sure.
I think another one of my takeaways from that conversation comes from the story Jill told about the car with the L on it for the learner, and how just recognizing that the driver, or assuming that the driver was a learner, affected the behavior of the other people around them, the drivers around them, and how when our kids mess up in the heat of the moment, it's really hard to stop and remember that they're just kids and that they are in a learning process, and that mess up is a learning opportunity. But I think that conversations like this and just taking a minute to stop and think through it will help us to remember that and give our kids the grace and space to be learners, and to give them a little bit of time and a redirect in a way that it directs them towards spiritual growth in those moments.
And when they're, and I guess because they're learners, if they're in Bible Bowl, if they're going to youth group, if they're showing up to church and you're taking them to church and they still mess up, they're learners, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're, even though you have a good kid,
right,
and they make a mistake, their spiritual health is not on the line all of a sudden. So I think we can, like Jill put it, we can go too far in the other direction too of, oh no, they've made a spiritual unhealthy decision, and that's condemning. But we're learning. It's a process. We're learning in a lot of different ways. Well, I hope that you will take a second as a family to pray for overall family health. I hope that you'll pause maybe now and say a prayer for your child or your student's spiritual health and their prayer life. And you can also email us at hellofamlab@gmail.com. We would love to hear from you. We would love to hear ways that you assess your child's spiritual health, things that you do to measure spiritual health. things that you've, kind of developmental leaps that you have seen in your child's spiritual health. Anything that you have to comment on this episode, things that you liked or would like to hear in the next episodes to come, we would love to hear from you. Again, email us at hellofamlab@gmail.com. Again, thank you to Harrison and to Jill. We appreciate their time in Searcy, Arkansas at Harding University at Midnight Oil Coffeehouse. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Mikey. Thank you, Travis. We appreciate all that you guys do as well. Thank you guys for listening to the Fam Lab. We will see you, not really, hear us talk to you in the next episode of the Fam Lab.